why it is I'm doing this, and maybe the first sentence or two out of the introduction player's handbook to get us going. Everybody knows everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all good.
Yeah, pretty familiar with everyone. Yeah.
And Cam, are you saying have you played at ShadyDM's table too, or with him?
I played at Shady's table, but I play with Shady, so me and Shady are both in Doc's campaign.
Yeah.
And then Cam and I have been in Bjorvio's.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how did you all find us? Are you all from TikTok?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that not the most amazing thing?
It is.
This whole this started May 10th. I did my first TikTok. And now that I've gotten in the groove of doing the TikToks every day, the live streams from like 9:30 to 12, I've gotten like 600 viewers in the last 7 days. It's just really growing. Yeah. And so many of them want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the lives hit 40,000 likes.
Mm-hmm.
Was it day before yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
40,000
Oh yeah,
likes.
I was in there. It got really up there.
It's getting to where I can't keep up with the comments. It's crazy. Yeah. Okay, we have viewers. We are ready to go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So, glad to see everybody here tonight. I want to introduce you to the folks that are here. I don't have names up for everybody. They do kind of. You can sort of see. Or maybe I'll let you all introduce yourselves, except I'm going to introduce the guy who's sitting beside me with the glasses right there. That's BonusDad. And it's his Zoom, and so he's keeping an eye on things because I think we all know how non-technical I am.
And welcome to my sandbox. Play nice, kids.
All right. Beside me on the other side is.
My name's Cam, otherwise known as Neuromark PI. So I am a Twitch streamer, D&D player, all-round general person, humanoid as is.
We love that about you, Cam. And you also are a player. You DM and play both.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have DM'd in the past, and I currently am a pretty much long-standing player in general.
Okay, and right below you is, in the white t-shirt.
Hi, I'm Doc Robert. You can call me Robbie. I am mostly a DM, several nights a week. I run a Dungeons and Dragons club for my students because I'm also an English teacher. And it's been really fun to be on this D&D journey over the last 5 years or so. So it's weird to get to the point where I'm starting to feel like more of a veteran player since I was a newbie for so long.
Okay, great. And immediately adjacent is?
I don't know who. If it's me, I can't tell.
Go ahead and do it. Oh, you're in an odd place. Okay, let us have it, Joe. Tell us about you.
Hi, I'm Shady. I've been a forever DM for the last 6 years, but have finally had the opportunity to be a long-standing player in some games. It's great to be here. I'm happy to provide some insight into this wonderful experience.
Okay, and last but never least.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bjorvio. I am a TikToker, do a lot of nerdy as well as Dungeons & Dragons related content. I've been a player for the last 3.5 years and a DM for about the same amount of time. Basically homebrew only, but yeah, I love D&D, and I think my strengths lie in DMing more than playing, but I like to do both if I can.
Okay. Well, why I came up with this idea of getting us all together and talk, I love D&D. I've been playing since 2017. I almost can't get enough of it. The most I was ever in campaigns at once was basically 5 a week, and that was too many, so I've had to scale back. But since I have started doing TikTok live streams, I get questions every single day from people who are saying, I really want to play D&D. I don't know how to play. I don't know where to get started. Or I've heard about it. What is it exactly? And so we're starting to put some programming together through our Discord channel and our Twitch live streams and my TikTok to address all of those questions. And I thought a good thing tonight would be to do a general introduction of if you were describing Dungeons & Dragons to someone as though it was any other game like Monopoly or Clue or whatever, how would you describe the game and what would you say about it to encourage somebody to play without getting bogged down in specifics, because in Dungeons and Dragons there are a gabillion specifics, and the only way to learn about all of those, truly, I think we would all agree on this in this group of chatters here, is to play the game.
Oh, 100%.
Yep.
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
It's the only way to learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons is to play it. And we would love to give you opportunities to do that through our BonusMom's Tavern Discord that used to be Ages of Einor, and I get confused. Okay, welcome to Hannah and JoJo, Cassie, Black Moon. I'm going to kick us off with a couple of things that the Player's Handbook has to say about Dungeons and Dragons, and then we're going to open it up to our panelists to take further. The Dungeons and Dragons role-playing game is about storytelling in worlds of swords and sorcery. It shares elements with childhood games of make-believe. That's our beginning. It's a role-playing game. What's a role-playing game?
So I always, as a teacher, maybe I get a little too English teachery, but one of the ways I like to explain it is through, is through the lens that I explain a lot of things to students. And whenever you are reading a story, one of the things, and you learn about this super early on in your educational career, is you look at the perspective of the story. So if it's, if you're reading Gatsby and Nick's telling the story, I saw this, I did that, then that's first person. More novels are in third person. He went down the stairs, he walked around, but Dungeons and Dragons is one of the rare examples of a second person story where the narrator, where the storyteller is telling you what's happening. Now, sometimes in some books, it's just narrates the events that you happen. But in this sort of storytelling, the events are narrated to you and you get to respond back to the narrator. The DM is basically a narrator of a story, and you put your own story beats into it, and then those get resolved with dice rolls. But essentially, it is a collaborative storytelling game. It's the type of thing where the DM starts to tell a story to you, and you fill in the pieces, and there are some rules to make sure that everybody's on the same page and structure it. But, if you think of the old Choose Your Own Adventure books, I used to love those as a kid. I love those books where if you do A, flip to page 72, if you do B, flip to page 182, and then you get to see what happened. And I explain Dungeons and Dragons as kind of like that, where you have a story narrated to you, and then you make choices, and then you resolve those outcomes.
Okay, that's good. I love that. That's very clear. Maybe more clear than the Player's Handbook is in total, because I find it very unclear. Okay, any other perspective from anybody else if you had to describe what it is?
My first introduction to D&D was as a board game. So I focus more on that tabletop aspect. Obviously, playing online is different to a tabletop, but if you have that imagination there to be playing D&D, you're essentially just playing a tabletop game with your friends and family. The same as you would with, we call it Cluedo, not Clue, but same thing. Cluedo or Monopoly or anything like that. You are essentially playing a board game, but the difference with this board game is you are the board game, not the board.
All right. Ooh, I like that. That's
the way
good.
that that's my perception of D&D. It's almost like a real life video game, if that makes sense.
That's similar to how I would describe it. Yeah. I think for me, I have a very different. The first time I played, there was no board. There was no characters. It was all theater of mind. And so you had to become the person. You had to role play this person because there was nothing else there. And it wasn't until I became a DM that we started using a board. Oh, that's so cool. Because I'm not good at, and the only reason we started using a board was for distance.
Okay.
So we could actually figure out how far something is, but now it's become a staple in my games. Like I know how to use maps and everything like that. But for me, D&D is all about becoming somebody else and letting that person live. You get to live as that person would. It's like, take your favorite open world video game where as soon as you get through the tutorial, you can go out and do whatever you want, but more. You're not limited to, oh, well, the video game designers don't want you to climb this mountain. In
Yeah.
D&D, it's, I'm going to climb this mountain and then I'm going to, cut down a tree and slide down the tree down the mountain. Like, you can do that. Your only limit is your own imagination, and that is just absolutely beautiful to me.
Okay. Shady?
Yeah, I mean, all of them bring in some very important parts, and I agree with all of them. Those are all very accurate descriptions as to what role playing in Dungeons and Dragons is like. Like Bjorvio said, like, you're not as restricted as you are in video games. The only thing I would add upon that is, it's one of those famous DM things. Is you can certainly try. You can certainly try to
Yep.
climb the mountain. And it's part of being able to have those options that I feel like really sets D&D apart, or like just any like role playing type game, just set them apart from other things that you would otherwise get to experience.
Now, I am older than almost everybody on this screen you're looking at right now. Sorry, BonusDad. And so for me, when I try to describe Dungeons and Dragons, I go back to what I remember doing as a child, which you all were playing electronic games, probably all of you. Well, I was outside playing pretend. I was playing cops and robbers. I was playing the Princess in the Tower. And forgive me, everyone, I was playing cowboys and Indians, okay? That was then, this is now. And so me and my cousins or my friends would come up with a scenario, and I loved to be the princess, okay? And somebody would describe how they would save me, or we'd make this plan, or the robbing the bank if it was cops and robbers. We would make all of these scenarios up, and then we would, just by some who told their story the best, I don't know, as we ran around try to figure out which way it went. Well, Dungeons and Dragons is that, with the exception of when you set the scene, you roll the dice to see who wins. And the dice and the roll, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad, sometimes goes in the favor of the bad guys and sometimes in the favor of the good guys, is capricious and it's unexpected, and it is not able to be determined before you roll the dice. So it's an element of surprise. So that's what at the core, I think, that Dungeons and Dragons is. Now, the thing about the Dungeons and the Dragons, that's like the description from the very beginning, right? And in the beginning, whenever the people in the 70s that made this game up, it was a thing called dungeon crawls, right? Now, have any of you all played a dungeon crawl adventure?
Yep.
Yes.
I have once,
That's what
twice.
that board game literally is. That's what I played as a 7-year-old child, 6 or 7-year-old, playing dungeon crawls with my older brother, playing as Miley, the elven wizard. That was the first ever.
And you were digging your way, whatever method,
Oh, yeah.
if it was Tomb of Horrors or that or whatever. You were traveling through all the different rooms of the dungeons, right, trying to get to the treasure or kill the monsters on the way. It has evolved into, now you have Dungeons and Dragons in outer space. Now you have steampunk Dungeons and Dragons. Bjorvio and Cam and I just played a game. Our friend Beast Baker, who was one of our DMs, Beast, created a Western Dungeons and Dragons with guns and, people who acted like cowboys and gunslingers and things. So it has really turned into, you can be anything you want. And how is that working out for you all in your experiences in Dungeons and Dragons? With the world is your oyster now, you can set your games or you can play in games that happen anywhere.
Well,
Go for it.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's hard. Dungeons and Dragons really, when it comes down to it, is imagination play.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes down to it, it's really only your imagination that limits it. Obviously, we have all the source books and things like that from all the different kind of areas of possibility. But really, when it comes down to it, imagination plays what that game is. And if you can think of it and you can have that idea in your mind of what you want a campaign to look like or be, or how you want that adventure to be styled, whether it be princesses or Western, or whether you want it to be steampunk. I mean, I had a great time in that steampunk adventure that was totally different to anything I've ever played. I'm very much used to playing the bog standard, very much fantasy kind of campaign. And really, it just opens up so many different possibilities and gives opportunity for different people to DM, for people to play in a different way, for different people to play, because what one person may like, another may not. So it just opens up possibilities of different people and different
Yeah, that brings up
energies and ideas entirely.
That brings up a different edge on this that I want to move to in a minute, but I just want to point out that Black Moon in chat just said that she used to play pretend at her family's house, and they played dragon people. And I did not play about dragons. I did do some outer space because, you know, the space program in the 1960s, but I never played dragon people. That sounds totally fascinating. And I have somebody who's brought up a subject I want to get to a little bit later, so I haven't forgotten you, Hannah. I'm gonna get there in a little bit. Oh, somebody else, Black Moon again, they did a horror My Little Pony game once. Okay. Alrighty.
Odd concept, but still a
I
concept
kind of dig it.
nonetheless.
Yeah.
Do that.
It's still a concept.
Sounds like fun.
It's just a very odd one.
Well, the handbook is agreeing with you all, and that it is a game of imagination. It's about picturing the towering castle beneath the stormy sky and imagining how a fancy adventurer might react to the challenges. So, challenges. That's another thing about Dungeons and Dragons. We were just out in the backyard, whatever their kids were, again, cowboys and Indians, space aliens and astronauts. That tends to put you with, there's some conflict going there. So Dungeons and Dragons has conflict. Remarks on that? Anything like what?
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like most, I mean, maybe not even most, but all stories, especially memorable ones, have some sort of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a conflict within yourself, against nature, or a space clown, or even a My Little Pony adventure, whatever it may be. Conflict is almost, I feel like, is almost necessary um, when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons as a whole. Part of like the excitement and the rush is when your character overcomes the conflict or overcomes the challenge. It's probably one of the best parts of the game, you know. Yeah, conflict is just one of those things that is, it's without the conflict, your character has no reason really to push forward in the storytelling.
So, yeah. So it takes imagination to play, and there's got to be some conflict in there. And there's a story, right? Doc Robert, definitely, that was the first thing he mentioned, is there's a story there. Now, all of us out in the backyard didn't really have a story. We were just playing. So one of the things about Dungeons and Dragons is there's a story. And Bjorvio referred to about how you don't know where the story is going. But one person at the table does know what the story actually is. The other players, if you're going to be a brand new Dungeons and Dragons player, we're going to help you make a character, and it even can be yourself if you want it to be. You're going to sit down at the table, and you are not going to know what happens next. But one person at the table is going to know what's next, and that is the Dungeon Master or the Game Master. And Doc Robert, you explain things so well. Tell us what the role of the Dungeon Master is.
Yeah, so to tie all this stuff together, as we said, conflict is the key driving force in any story. In no traditional kind of story can you have a compelling narrative without some sort of conflict. There are open world games and such without conflict. If you think of, games like Minecraft that don't have a straightforward conflict, but those also aren't trying to tell a story. In Dungeons and Dragons, if you want to figure out what to do, you have to have some sort of roadmap. And the Dungeon Master sets these scenes up, sets forward, either create or build or find the conflicts that we are going to set up for the players in order to build these scenarios for them to navigate. So, and there are a million ways to do this. Lots of people like to write their own homebrew stories and in their own worlds, and that is awesome. I usually either don't have the time or creativity to do that. I love to run the pre-written modules that Dungeons and Dragons Wizards of the Coast puts out, and then I modify them to my leisure to make them my own and change up things as I kind of want to do. So, but the Dungeon Master, with this knowledge of the world, with this knowledge of the story, sets the conflicts and then dictates the results of those actions to the players. So one of the other best comparisons to make is to improv comedy, or or those sorts of theater activities where you are basically just yes-anding the entire time, where you, as the players, make their snap decisions on what they want to do. You, and as the dungeon master, have to know how the world might work and what the reasonable outcome of that might be. If a character jumps off a cliff, they're going to fall. If you punch the king, you're going to get arrested. If you steal money from a rich person, if he notices, you're probably going to jail. So you extrapolate those consequences, and as the DM, your word is kind of the law, and players have to work within these stories that you set up in this series of causes and effects, of actions and reactions, until you either can't find a time for the group to meet, or the story comes to some sort of ending, satisfying or otherwise. That's and that is where and the DM's job is to facilitate these conflicts, actions, and reactions to move the story further.
Okay, and I love that you mentioned that there's improv involved, because improvisation, because I'm headed in that direction here in a little bit, and we are getting remarks in chat, and I've kind of asked Black Moon and Ace to sort of help me out on that, and there are a couple we're going to get to, so just bear with me. I did see your contact years, but I'm trying to put them into some sort of description of what this game is that kind of makes sense. So where we are is that we have a story, and we have somebody who knows the backbones of the story, and then they know who the people are that are sitting at their table. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, and usually there is discussion between the dungeon master and the human beings, us, the real life people, as we decide who and what we're going to be. And in general terms, I need somebody. Bjorvio, you haven't had a shot here. Give us a little bit of an understanding. If we're a brand new player, we're going to play D&D, and we're one of the people who is sitting at the table. Okay, what do we do in general terms to prepare ourselves to sit at table? What's our job? As far, and I'm thinking about characters here and classes and races.
So before you can really set out on an adventure in the game of Dungeons and Dragons, you need to figure out who is going out on the adventure. Is it you? Is it a character from a movie that you like that you want to bring into Dungeons and Dragons? Is it some original idea for a character that's popped in your head? Did a specific class speak to you? Did a specific race say, oh, that sounds really cool, maybe I'll come up with something like that? Before you set out on the adventure, you have to know who is the person that is actually going out there, and that is the character that you're going to be creating. As I and Bonus Mom mentioned, sometimes that's yourself, and that's fine. Maybe you've always been like, I really want to be good with my fist, so I'm going to pretend that I was a monk in this world, and we're going to go out and we're going to beat up the bad guys. Or maybe you wish that you had magic powers and you were better at studying, and so woohoo, now you're a wizard. There's so many different ways to pick what kind of person is going to go that you want to send out on this adventure, and I have yet to find a wrong way to do it. But I would think before you do that, you just need to know what kind of character you want to set out on the adventure, and let your dungeon master know what your goals are. Who is this character? What are they trying to accomplish on this adventure? Where do you see them going? What are some things they would do? What are some things they would not do? these are the kinds of conversations you want to have with your dungeon master, since your dungeon master has the backbone of the story and can incorporate characters from your character's backstory into the plot, and give your character a sense of direction.
Now, a good thing about this, and we didn't have this when I was the kid, back to the kid again, is that this book actually, or D&D Beyond online, this book has all of those technical things about how you make that character. So if you're a brand new player, really basically you can sit down and say, I don't even know who I want to be, to your DM, and your DM may ask you some questions and things and whatever, and say, well, this kind of a character has a lot of magic. This kind of character is just strong, and it's going to be something that can beat lots of things. And the book actually has technical and mechanical ways to help you decide who you are, what you are, how strong you are, all that sort of thing. None of which it is that really we need to talk about tonight, because we're going to be talking about that forever. But you're able to sit down at the table, make a couple of decisions like Bjorvio is telling you, and then there's going to be all the help you ever wanted to actually nail down the mechanics of the character. So you've got that.
For me, obviously, with the campaign, I think from player's perspective, especially when you're new to D&D or new to a community, like obviously I was quite recently, and Doc Roberts will tell you, I introduced a character to the campaign that had no backstory, that didn't have anything really about them other than their race, their class, their abilities, and that was it. And I was essentially, as such an audience player, I was playing, but only for the fact of the story. So I was just listening in, I was joining in, adding a little bit of role play here and there, nothing much, and adding just myself in there really, with this character that really didn't have a whole lot of anything. And as soon as I've kind of become used to the community and used to the campaign and waited for kind of a good pivotal moment, I've now introduced a character that does have a backstory, that does have history, that does have a whole story behind them, which I'll not mention because I know there's people that are here that have got that are in my campaign, because there's surprises to come. But yeah, so I think that element of just of really, when we say that the best way to learn is to play, is really just jumping in there head first, creating something. Whether that be, my character was an owlin, was a wild magic sorcerer. I mean, I played wild magic sorcerer 1,000,001 times. An owlin, I like owls. That was simply what it was.
Can I add one quick thing to that? Because I think you said it very well. I, as a DM, have had a player give me a 3-page backstory. And I also had a player give me a single sentence as a backstory, and they were both completely satisfied with what I did in the campaign. They both had equal amount of time. They both had development, and I think there isn't a minimum of how long or short your backstory has to be. It's just so long as the DM has, honestly, I think I've even used just a single word, but any little thing to help guide where you want it. Don't think it has to be some long essay or paper or anything. A single sentence is totally fine.
Something I want to throw in about that to make that point is that Pixl used to really like, before COVID, to go to conventions and not sign up to be a dungeon master to do games, because we were going, out of state in different places. But he would find a table at the convention center or the motel or whatever that nobody was sitting at, and he would put up his screen and he'd fold an index card and put over it, have game will DM. And one time he had 12 people sitting around that table, every chair they could find, and he was handing out pre-gens. Okay, do we all know what pre-gens are? That refers to the DM who's doing one-shots or whatever can choose to just make some random characters up, roll the stats. He had me doing it just to learn how, and I never did. But I know that we carry around a thing that has first player, third player, fifth player, and ninth player characters. It's like a briefcase, okay? So that if we were doing a game, we can just hand out pre-gens is people sit down and the people find out who their characters are as they're playing the game. So you do not have to have a big backstory, and some people would rather not. When we talked about dungeon crawls and one-shots, those are terms that we're mentioning. We kind of talked about what a dungeon crawl is. One-shot adventures happens in one time you sit down, right? There's not a lot of time in there to get into that angst that's driving you and trying to find your lost mother and your baby and your uncle and the money you lost and all that. A lot of times there's not that kind of time. Short adventure is better. Long adventure, you can do anything you want to, because again, I think Doc Roberts said it, or somebody did, Shady, till they all move away and won't meet and play anymore, you can just keep going as much as you want. Okay. So, anything on that from anybody else?
Talking about length of play, the the Ages of Ainur, the World of Ainur, that adventure started out in March of 2017, and we played that until COVID hit on table, and then we played it via Zoom, and we played that, what, Bonus Mom, about
Until
3.5 or 4 years?
Until the middle of 2021. Till the middle of 2021, we were playing it. And we haven't finished the game yet. We had to take a break. Pixl got worn out. Yeah.
So,
Okay, brief
it's a
description.
massive world.
Brief description, the difference between one-shot, short adventure, and long campaign.
Ooh, yeah. I could tackle that. I've run both. I've got so a campaign is like you said, it's more of a dynamic story where the characters near the end are not necessarily the same as they were in the beginning. There are lots of trials and tribulations that they will go through, and is a longer term than just one sit down at the table. A one shot is pretty self-explanatory. It's a single event that normally doesn't have any outside repercussions in the long run, so that people can kind of get in place. And a lot of people in those types of adventures like to run usually like higher level characters, so that because it's just one of those things that a standalone thing. A one that I've been running a lot recently is very popular. It's essentially a haunted hotel that's run by possessed Muppets, and it's a ridiculous,
I cannot wait to
whimsical.
play this campaign.
It's a lot of
wait to
fun.
play this
Oh
campaign.
man,
and
that's amazing.
And a lot of people enjoy it. It's random, and there are 100 different floors, and each time people play it, it's different. I have players roll dice to see what floors they're going to land on, and everyone loves solving the puzzles or fighting the enemies on their way up. And because of the nature of the game, it doesn't affect anything else. So people can play whatever it is they want to play or experiment with other things, and they have fun with that. Whereas the campaign, you're focused on like one character and developing them over time and exploring a lot of other things with it, whereas one shots are ridiculous like that.
Well, you're getting an unsolicited testimonial from McReese vouching that it's a blast. Okay, so, and it does sound,
Yes,
it sounds like a lot of fun. Okay.
They did play in that one. She had a lot of fun in there. They were absolutely ridiculous, but it was great. I enjoyed playing with her in the game, so I'm happy she enjoyed it.
Well,
As a side note, but I do recommend, a few years ago for April Fool's Day, Wizards of the Coast put out a warlock whose patron was the Swedish chef. I definitely recommend finding that if you can stuff it out. Sounds perfect to add to that.
okay, what was the name of it again? You said
The Swedish chef, is that it?
It was a warlock patron whose patron was the Swedish chef
the Swedish
from
chef.
the Muppets. So
Oh, it was the Swedish chef from the Muppets. Oh my!
Earlier this year, I ran a one shot where we called it Untitled Goose Game, the one shot, where I found a stat block for the goose from Untitled Goose Game, and this goose was terrorizing a town, and everyone was so scared to describe it to the players. And finally, after about an hour, they discover it was a goose. and they're like, "Oh, this isn't so bad," and the goose like just nearly destroyed them. It was absolute tomfoolery, and I cannot recommend it enough. Go just search Untitled Goose Game 5e or whatever, and I have never had more fun in a one shot. I not only lost my voice, but my stomach legitimately hurt. Like I've been working out because I was laughing so much.
Okay.
To kind of tie all of this together, I think it's also good to note that we're describing all of this, that the tone of these games can vary so wildly, and
Yes.
might also be something that you pair with the type of game. If you're playing a one shot, you can be pretty darn silly and it really not have a problem, because no matter how silly it is, you're going to be done with the rest of the day, done with it after that game. But if you try to do a 5-year long very silly campaign, that might get tiring over a period of time. But but even then, I know in my home game, even though I mean, there's certainly some moments of seriousness. We also have pants banditry, which is become rather prevalent, and so the silliness creeps in from everywhere else, and trying to find Shady, you can have that look.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
all I'm saying is I joined into their campaign, so I joined into Doc's campaign into pants banditry, and fighting an ancient white dragon on day one. My mind was blown instantaneously. But I think that whole thing with the one shots is like, as a player, like from a player perspective, you really do have three kind of categories. You've got the dungeon crawl, you've got the one shot, you've got the campaign, and those one shots tend to be, in most cases that I've played them, one of two ways. They tend to be high comedy value, real funny, real laughs and giggles, having a great time, or they tend to be dark, mysterious, kind of scary, and that kind of horror element. But you've got all sorts. I mean, there's Christmas one shots out there, there's Halloween, there's Easter, there's literally holiday one shots galore, among hundreds and thousands of other things. I mean, I'm assuming the hotel the Hotel of Muppets is an entirely created from your mind, Shady, which really speaks volumes for your mind.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite adventures to run, and hopefully I hope to run it more often next year.
Yeah. But then you've got the campaign, and I think that campaign for a lot of players, I mean, I know for me definitely, that's the sweet spot. That campaign is where you create a character that has an adventure, and we're talking Lord of the Rings style adventure. We're talking this huge, long, epic adventure that just goes on forever. And yeah, sometimes that ends when the table kind of ends or the story ends, which I'll be honest, I'll straight up say it here and now, I've never seen a D&D story end, and I don't think I know anybody. You have?
Yes.
Oh,
I have finished 2 campaigns in my homebrew world. One of them was about a year long, one of them was about 2.5 years, and they take place in the same world, just on different continents and different times apart. But I mean, it was just kind of one of those where you fight the big bad evil guy, you resolve the conflict, and the conflict was resolved. The big bad evil guy was done, and it was like, okay, these characters and their story is done. Let's move on to a different world where mayonnaise is an instrument, and you have all these weird inside jokes or you fight Rick Astley because everyone's asking for it. But then you also have moments where people are crying because something really intense happened to one of these characters with their backstory reveals. Like, I've had other people's players are crying over people's characters. Like, you have those deep emotional connections. And while at the same time, you can also have these real, like, ongoing jokes, like mayonnaise is an instrument, but it's also a language, and all these random things like that. Like, the campaign for me, they always end when those character stories are done, when they're resolved, when they're wrapped up. And then but we're not done with this world. Cool. Let's stay in the world. just with new people in a new time. We'll find a new conflict, a new big bad, a new adventure to be had. And I just get goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I really like about the pre-written adventures, because I've actually finished a lot of adventures. I think that I have probably, to completion, I've played in 3 or 4 and probably run 7 or 8 that have actually got to the total end.
That's amazing.
When you have a pre-written module, it makes that so much easier, because there is such a clearly defined, points where it has that. That's one of the reasons I really like it, on top of the fact that I might have a creative writing minor, but I am not writing a novel anytime soon. I don't, it's hard to make those narrative structures work.
Well, you bring up a really interesting point there, and I just want to plug something. If I cut you off, I'll let you get right back. And that is that Pixl has asked me if he can have a Sunday afternoon, because he wants to specifically talk about to DMs and players about taking an adventure, a published adventure, a canned adventure, a module, and personalizing it to whoever the characters at the table are going to be. And he is doing that in Curse of Strahd, I think, wonderfully well. And Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is on our, it's out there on YouTube, but it's out there in podcast, is the most successful campaign we've ever had at incorporating people's backstories in there and making them a part of the story. So more discussion about that's coming. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, and that's perfect. And that's what I like to do. For me, I love being creative. I love veering off and doing my own things in the story. But for me, that's easiest when I have an anchor of this text. So, for example, so the game that I'm playing with some of the people here at the round table is the Icewind Dale adventure. And Shady's character, a bard by the name of Buffalo Wang, he had one of his friends who was in one of the towns. Now, that just is how we incorporated. This was a pre-written character who was already in the adventure, a drunken dragonborn former adventurer by the name of Trovis, who we just decided had in the previous had adventured with Buffalo, and it worked out great for the story. It really made for some good connections and some other stuff. And that's just one of those when you have that pre-written adventure, you can take the characters, the story, all of this stuff, and then just decide, oh, hey, I can make this a thing. You know this person. This is a thing that happened to you. In the same campaign, one of our other characters, I believe McReese is in the audience here, her character just so happened who had an estranged mother. Her estranged mother just happened to be one of the evil barbarian chiefs. It's amazing how these things work out that way. But when you see the connections that go, like the fact that she did not know her birth mother, and there's a story beat where a character was abandoned by their mother, I'm like, well, we can put those things together, and having that go, and it works really well. And whether you're doing a longer campaign, a one shot, or a indefinite adventure, you can always mix these things in, as that's another thing I really, really love about, and it doesn't have to be just one or the other. You can pull elements from everything here too.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, but it's just that we're getting remarks in chat, and I want to share them. Okay, so hold on where you are. And we're getting something about long live the pants bandit, which must mean something to somebody.
Oh, no.
And oh wow, Goose Game.
Almost didn't.
And then another thing from Hammer and Pixl our DM, who wants you to know that he has cried while DMing. He's been moved at a point of something that's happened at the table
100%.
to cry.
We have in our game too. When there was a character death, we went from pants banditry to actual tears being shed within a solid 10 minutes, and then we're just all kind of literally moping around because we humans are sad for the thing in the fictional game that happened.
Right.
A certain player, not mention any names.
Yeah.
Created an entire will.
Had to be
all of you got something in your throat.
Sad for some reason. Shady. Sorry, this cough is really bad.
Pixl also wants us to recognize, and he's right about this because I'm in one of them, and that's the short campaign. And that's the campaign that you're going to be meeting from 6 to 10 times for. That's what Siege of Castle Rend was, the Matt Colville adventure that explored the whole idea behind strongholds and followers. and now Reaching of Bedegar, which is and it's all about how to get warfare battles between armies incorporated into 5e. And now we're doing Region of Bedegar, which is from the book Kingdoms and Warfares. So I just wanted to bring those up, and that's true. And have you all is there anybody here, because BonusDad pointed out it happened to us, had the one shot that turned into a campaign?
I've been doing that for 3.5 years now.
Yeah.
I did, and it actually in the server, in the Discord server, when I started running the Miracle Hunters game, it was intended to be a one shot, and I was in a position where I was like, I don't know if these people are going to enjoy the game, and they have not stopped coming to the table, and it became a campaign.
And it became a campaign. Yeah,
it's been amazing.
Yeah.
That's how
That's
the
kinda
first big D&D game I ever played. Like in the more recent years since I played 5e, that was how we started as well. So it was just a one shot to try out as friends, and then 3 years later we were still playing. So
yeah, it happens
That's kind of
that
the way the Ages of Einor started out. I don't know exactly what the timeline was on Pixl developing the world, but it started out with the what was it, the Dealing Order? What was
The
name
Tomb of the
it?
Dealing Order,
Tomb of the
which is an
Dealing Order,
adventure
that's
that Matt Colville wrote or told us. He told you during his YouTube tutorial how to be a DM and how to put an adventure together. And it was just like, this is all you got to do. And he started throwing this stuff in. And that's the one Pixl used to show his parents and his cousins and some cousins what D&D was. And again, we played it. He didn't sit down and tell it to us. We played it.
Yeah, and so as he developed the map of the world, cities were added in, and it was almost like a series of connected one shots that there was a sort of a storyline, overall world type storyline. We're saving the world from the evil whatever, and some of the characters have different agendas based on their backstory, what they were trying to accomplish, and so forth. And so it got really complicated, and we had one of those parts of the story where there was a time shift, and then we're at a place in the story where we're just about to get back to the thing that happened that would reverse that and take us back to where we were in time. But anyway, and it's but some surprising things happen. It's just amazing. And sometimes I think the DM is surprised more than anybody. He wrote the story. It never goes.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
I don't think it ever goes how the DM thought.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many times has the DM, you pictured every way it was going to go except the way it went? Hey, here's Pixl. Get on there and come join us.
We're all talking about me.
A group of adventurers that decided 3/4 of the way through the adventure that they actually wanted to work for the bad guy, and it turned into an evil campaign from there on out. So that was fun. Sometimes you just have to roll with the punches like that and modify the entire story since they are now working for the bad guy and fighting the good guys.
That happened to one of my characters as a player. I think I achieved my ultimate goal. I played an evil-based character because not a lot of people tend to play an evil-based character because it is harder to play kind of an evil-style character. But I played an evil character and played it that well that my DM decided to take my character off me and become the big bad evil guy.
BonusDad can.
One of my characters, the character in Ages of Einor is Alistair McAllister. He was the wizard. He's a wizard a high elf wizard. And you think of wizards as being sort of squishy characters and soft. And he wound up killing 2 dragons.
Yeah, the only 2.
Storyline.
However, you were the first person in the adventure killed. He was our first player death. And then it got interesting.
A mind flayer ate my brain. and then I had to go and see the what was it? The guy in the void.
Yeah, Pixl wrote this whole
Nice.
plan for whoever died first was going to meet the Outlander and have an opportunity to come back. And
So now the problem with Alistair is that
Not the Outlander.
if a
oh, excuse me, are you going to get on here?
I don't know. I guess I could.
Do.
Yes, that's the answer.
Oh heck, what do you call him? A cleric casts a detect undead spell. Alistair shows up.
Yeah, it was the Outsider. I told you all the wrong thing. I'm sorry. And I'm encouraging Pixl to join us. He just got home from work. Okay, something was said way back in the early part of this that's a little bit of a different subject, and we can come back to this, but I do not want this person to not get their thing addressed. And that ties into all the things we're talking about, what this adventure is, and we as the players and the DM, and how, you know, we interact and we bond, and, you know, we feel what our characters feel, all that stuff. Have you had the experience that your D&D world affects you in ways that make it either easier or harder, but hopefully easier to deal with situations in your real life? We had somebody remark that being involved in D&D actually helped them deal with trauma in their lives. So
Yes.
therapeutic aspects
Yes.
of D&D.
Yes. For me, I grew up wanting to be an animator, wanting to be someone who wrote cartoons, and because I have spirals and spirals of 900 characters that I created in the 3rd grade that I had backstories for, that I knew all their powers. I knew who their moms were, like, and I'm not kidding. It's over 900. And unfortunately, I was born with a handwriting disorder. I cannot draw anything to save my life. And so I always felt super limited in being able to express my stories. Like I'm not, my wife will tell you, I'm not good with my words when it comes to, like, I can't type or anything like that. So for me, D&D is the first time in my life that I get to do what I have wanted to do since 3rd grade, and that is tell stories. And what I've learned is people actually like those stories for the first time. I was rejected, like, because I couldn't draw. People didn't care about those stories. They didn't care what was the story underneath. All they saw was what I couldn't draw.
Okay.
And so for the first time in my life, over the last 3.5 years, I'm able to almost express myself through my characters, through my stories, through my villains, through my themes. And I finally get to open the vault on this door that has been closed for 27 years.
Wow, incredible story. Okay, all right, huge. Wow.
Yeah, so
Hi,
I have
everybody.
Okay.
I just wanted to say hi. I popped in.
Yeah, okay. Doc Robert and Shady, you had something too, didn't you? Am I waiting on? Did you have something you want to? Okay,
I
then.
do, but if someone else has
Okay,
something
Doc
to say,
Robert and then Shady, and then we'll see after that. Yeah, okay.
So, you know, as I've mentioned several times before, and if you've heard Bonus Mom talk, I run a club for my students that's a D&D club. And I've run it at both a middle school level and a high school level. And one thing, I knew it beforehand, but what I've noticed even more so than that is there is research out there that shows that role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons are a highly effective therapy tool for people with social disabilities. So, and I can vouch for this, as granted, I'm a teacher, not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist, but, well, there we go. However, I can say that I had a couple students with autism that, very understandably, through no fault of their own, had trouble understanding social cues, social circumstances, and how to react in certain situations, just because that's not how their brain worked. And Dungeons and Dragons gives them a chance to practice these skills in a low stakes environment.
Okay.
So if you screw up, the best thing about D&D is if you screw up, Will everyone yell at you? Yes, but they'll do it while laughing. They're not angry at you. It was funny. It was silly. And it comes to be a fun story. So these students who might really struggle with social situations get a chance to practice their social skills in a way that can A, shift the blame to a fictional character, and B, makes the stakes lower than it would be in actual working with real people. And it has been shown to be an enormously effective tool. And I've seen that, play out in front of me when these students have gotten better social skills because, and on top of that, just the straight up fact that they are making friends and talking with people in real life because of the game that they get to play. On top of the practicing social skills, there are multiple layers of benefits to it. And I could, if I love my job as a teacher, and the only job I can imagine doing otherwise is doing this kind of thing, professional DMing, if I was working with kids with social disabilities. But even then, I kind of get to have my cake and eat it too, because I do that already with that kind of stuff. But no, and it's interesting to see how that works. But it's a really, I think, an underutilized tool that hopefully now that the game is starting to become more and more mainstream, we can see take more and more, be helpful to more and more people.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I actually just want to build on that really quickly to say that it always has been that, right? There's been a perception, I think, that D&D is like an antisocial game, and it's these neckbeards in the basement and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is that it is an extraordinarily social game. The only thing you do is talk.
Yep.
That is the singular thing that this game requires is communication between
direct interaction
as they build this close-knit thing and they improvise this narrative. Yeah. So
okay, Shady DM.
I wanted to jump in with that.
I want Shady DM to fight your way into this and say what you wanted to say. Shh.
No, it's fine. I mean, they all brought up very excellent points, and I actually really can relate to what Bjorvio is saying, because storytelling is like one of my most favorite things ever. I've grown up watching and reading Lord of the Rings and just like being very into fantasy and sci-fi. Like I wanted to tell my own stories, but I was in a place where I couldn't do that. So yeah, D&D helps me with that, but D&D has also helped me with other things, like more personal things. My wife ran a game for me, and I got to play a character that was as close to me as I could be. It was very different. It was something I was kind of nervous about doing, but I told my wife, I was like, you know me better than anyone else. I said, I trust you with this. I want to play a game where I explore the disconnected feeling and relationship I have with my parents. It's like, I want to tackle that. And I was like, I don't know how, because you're going to be the one running it, but that's something I want incorporated into the story. And that was probably the most therapeutic short campaign I ever had, because I came out at the end of that. My character died in the end. And when I came out of that, though, like it was literally like it felt like going through a huge therapy session.
Okay.
I had a better idea of who I was and how I should probably handle things when it comes to my parents. And because of that, I have a better relationship with my father. And unfortunately, I know this is going to be, maybe sounds a little bad. I've actually distanced myself from my mother because of the toxicness that she brings with her. And because I did those things, I can honestly say that mentally I'm in a better place because of it.
The person who shared with me in the beginning that they had been able to work through trauma, Shady, has such a similar story to what you're telling me. I just glanced briefly. I'm sorry, I did not get to really read, but someone who definitely had challenges with parents. The parents had challenges with substance abuse, and that they were able to, through a character that they developed in Dungeons and Dragons, work through the trauma in their childhood. Now they've moved through it and they're out the other side. It's later in life, but they almost, so similar a thing. So I just wanted to just acknowledge that was the reference in trauma. Very similar
yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
with that character, I learned how to set boundaries with my mother.
Those
And
boundaries.
it worked for a little while, and eventually got to a point where that was no longer doing it. But I don't think without that experience, I probably would not be the same person I am today. It definitely helped a lot.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
awesome. Thank you so much for
100%.
sharing.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Normark, and then if Pixl has anything else,
Yeah,
and then
I mean-
I have something to add.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of obviously transferable kind of skills into day-to-day life, D&D has that opportunity to transfer skills. I mean, believe it or not, really, I've not always been a hugely confident person, and I must admit, I think playing D&D, and I mean, when I first played, I'm very much into chaotic characters that are odd and strange and have something just a little bit off about them, which is a little bit like me. Maybe not as intense, but I like that kind of like little oddity, and that ability to have that conversation and interacting with people directly, and especially I'm going to keep using joining this community as part of it, because this was a whole new experience for me. And honestly, if you ask Doc and you ask Shady, that first session that I was in, I think I barely spoke. Like,
Yeah,
I
I remember.
literally barely even spoke in that session at all. I was like, okay, I'm going to cast this. Okay, I'm going to cast this. Now you've got my new character that's in there repeatedly talking to themselves. You know, and
Yeah.
it just building a confidence and having that community around you and everyone sharing that experience is huge. It's monumental in being able to kind of share together in exactly the same thing. And like Pixel says, it is literally a game of social interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you realize it or not, you are interacting with somebody socially. Yeah, it's not you directly. Yeah, it's not specifically you as a person directly having a social interaction, but your character is, and who's created your character and who's controlling your character? No one else but you.
Oh, great. Pixel, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, sure. Which one of the things that actually is really cool is the fact that it's not you interacting personally. Like it is, but it isn't, right? Is that one of the things that we noticed playing that really long home game with the family was excuse me, sorry. When we first started, folks were kind of learning the ropes, very hesitant. After the first couple of character deaths, it really sort of supercharged the role playing because the characters felt like they really needed to react to those moments. But we found as we went on and all got better at the role playing stuff that it kind of allowed the family members to get to know each other in a kind of different way, in a different
Yes.
context, where it wasn't here I am Pixl in my late 20s and early 30s interacting with my parents who were in their 60s and 70s and so on, right? And my cousin who is in her 40s and 50s. It was these characters interacting, like it was still us, and it really was, we found very interesting how it kind of made us relate to each other differently. And it was good, right? To not have the social context of parent and child and age difference and all those things. They kind of fall away a little bit at the table. And we found, I think that was very interesting and very cool as we kind of got to know each other in a different way through the game.
Yes.
And then one other thing I wanted to say, which was I'm a big advocate for short campaigns. We've done the big long campaigns and they kind of go on forever. And I agree with the sentiment of taking the modules. Often some of the modules are really, really long, but there are good ones that are shorter. For instance, Lost Mine of Fandover is pretty short, and some of the other ones. And one of the things I like about it is you don't have to commit your whole life to this one character, and you can take those things from a beginning to an end, and you can start to learn the pacing of how to create a narrative arc when you have kind of an end date. Like I said, I've run one shots, I've run long campaigns, I've run short campaigns. And I will also say, especially for stream games, this is kind of a different animal entirely, which maybe is not the thing that we're jumping into right now. If you're trying to do a stream game, pick a short campaign. That is my biggest piece of advice for you, because if you're not professional actors and this is not your main source of income, people's lives will change. Someone will get a new job, someone will have a baby, someone will break up, someone will get married, someone will move, all these things will happen. And so you want to keep it, 6 to 20 sessions is like your probably golden zone there. And it'll help you learn the thought process that goes into making those good character arcs.
And I want to back up just a little bit so that I can add about how this has helped me in my life. And Pixl hit what I was going to hit is what it did for my family, because my children are intergenerational. My children are 20 years younger than their cousins, and we are both old enough to be our children's grandparents. Okay, and you have not really experienced D&D until you have seen one son trying to hit on another son in a D&D game because somebody's trying to get information from a barkeep, or seeing your husband enticing your son to do a lap dance because we're on recreation at the bathhouse. Okay, yes.
And the lap dancer was a gnome.
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness.
But but Pixl is so right in that it gives, and this is the thing that I truly want to say as again the old woman, which I harp on all the time. But one of the reasons why is the joy that I have that I can interact with all of you of all the different ages that are in front of me, and I'm sure are represented in this chat. And we have something to talk about that we can all relate to, and we can all exchange experiences, and we could all, like if we do have a convention or we all get in the same place, we're going to run towards each other like this, and it's just going to be a total conglomeration of different people, different accents, different parts of the country, different races, different preferences. But D&D absolutely will draw us together. So, and more chats. Oh, did the gnome lap dancer get small bills? We won't talk about that.
Actually, what I was going to say, no one's going to like this. You're all going to hate it, but no, it's gold coins, so she clinks like a wind chime.
Yeah, there you go.
Pixl.
Okay.
This is why I love D&D.
Yeah.
If I can add something real quick, I know one of the, it's amazing to me the way that these fictional games can turn into real life friends and relationships. When the pandemic hit, I was living alone, which I'm fine with, but I was getting exceptionally bored because I was teaching sixth graders who had about 20 minutes of work a day to do, because that's about all they could handle on their own during the pandemic. So I was playing D&D 6 nights a week just to try and, be less bored. Well, one of the games that I put together during that campaign was from people from literally all the way across the country, from Tennessee to Utah. We had Boston, Dallas, Austin, literally all the way across the country. And 2 of the players in that game, after meeting in my game, fell in love, got married. Now they have a child. And that's weird to think that there's a child whose existence is owed to a D&D game I started during the pandemic because I was bored.
That's something you can hold over that child, though, in the future. You'd be like, you only exist because of me, because of my game.
Oh, absolutely. And I will be doing that. You can be sure that I will absolutely be lording that over
that was
over
a character
them.
literally created by a DM.
Created.
That is a character that has literally been created by a DM.
My
it's
gosh.
a real life character.
That character creation gone to the next level.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, and these are people, and even though, as you might imagine, when they had a child, they were less able to play in a consistent game because they have a small child. But we still talk all the time. We're still friends. These are people who I care about. Last year, over the summer, we all came in from all over the country, and they all met at my house, and we hung out in real life, which was freaking really cool. So it's, I don't know, it's a cool thing that this fake game, this silly, stupid game can turn into real friendships, life-changing relationships, and it's a real thing. And it would be disingenuous to say it's anything else.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, some of the people I've been playing with in my current campaign, I have been friends with for 10, 11, 12 years, well before D&D, but our friendship has only grown because of it. while other people that are in my campaign, I've never met them in real life, not once, and they are super, super great friends that we've really bonded over the course of this adventure. And some people, like, I've known 5 years, some people I've known only through D&D, and it's crazy because I can't tell you the last names of some of the people in my group, but they're some of my best friends.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just, and it's crazy. Like it makes me think back of like The Hobbit, or where of Bilbo Baggins just running out of the Shire going, I'm going on an adventure. Like that genuine joy that he had, and now he's going. But it's like, you know, my friends and I, we've been on an adventure. We've been on several adventures, and we've been through dangerous situations. We've had hard conversations. We have fought Rick Astley.
Yeah.
You know, like
And
we've
that
done
guy, I've heard that
ridiculous
guy
things.
never gives up. So
Oh, what was?
I said I've heard
Well,
that guy
it's-
never gives up.
Oh no,
He never
Tre-
gives
he-
you up. That's
No,
usually
no,
what
but
I
the
hear. How it goes.
funny thing was, he could only speak in quotes from that song. So
Oh.
every inch, every
Incredible.
line of dialogue was from that song, and he could use the spell command as a bonus action. So he used words like dessert, where they just had to run away. It was great. But anyway, it's just like, you do all these things and you bond with these people because you are going on an adventure. You're sharing your life, whether it's your life or your character's life. You are going through these, you know, if your guy is falling off a cliff and someone grabs your character and pulls them back up, they just saved your character's life. Would you not be close to somebody in the real world if that happened? Of course you would.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
to say D&D is like universal and worldwide is like is the literal truth. I mean, hello.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, and
Like I'm like halfway around the world to most
one
of the
of
people
the
here.
things that I've been finding out more about recently is that some of the biggest pop cultural media like experiences that people have, a lot of them trace their roots to D&D, right? Everything from the fact that like tons of writers who write like movies and TV shows will talk about getting their start in learning about narrative and things like that from D&D, all the way down to like every Final Fantasy game, every Mass Effect game, every Dragon Age game, every like computer role-playing game. If you dig deep into the history of that, a lot of it, like Final Fantasy 1 and Baldur's Gate, are both like pure attempts to computerize the tabletop Dungeons and Dragons experience, and they end up leading to very different arcs between like, you know, JRPGs and Western RPGs and these kinds of things. But like Skyrim, for instance, that, you know, it's been 10 years and has come out on every platform from the PC to the PlayStation 3 to now the Switch or whatever, been released, I don't know, 18 different times. It runs on a Samsung fridge. Like iconic, you know, sort of cultural thing that so many people experience who have never played D&D at all, really has its roots in Dungeons and Dragons as a role-playing experience. And I, in fact, one day really kind of want to run like the attack on Helgen as a D&D adventure and just wait and see how long it takes people to realize that's what I'm doing. Because I think that would be very, very funny.
I mean, honestly, for me, I mean, to say that like D&D can be real world is like something entirely different. I mean, I think it probably still is there. I had like D&D written into my resume, like when I was applying for jobs, as essentially I gathered with friends to play tabletop games and problem solve. You know, it's a huge skill. Problem solving is a skill.
Now I wanted to
know,
hit
and
that. I agree.
Yeah, and it's definitely something you can even anyone who plays D&D 100% recommend. Put it onto your resume, because people are looking for problem solvers. People are looking for people who can work stuff out and have that initiative. Another D&D term, but have that initiative to
roll for it,
to work something out. And that is what D&D teaches you. It is almost like a school of knowledge all on its own.
Yeah.
Well, and it also teaches teamwork too.
Teamwork,
Does,
teamwork, initiative.
100%.
Yeah,
Honestly,
as a
the
new
list is
player,
endless.
one of the first things that I ran into, you know, Pixl said, describe the scene. So what do you do, like in the tavern or whatever? I was completely clueless. I was frozen, okay, as a new player. Well, my son Redbeard had played a lot of D&D, and his friend of the moment was there. And so they immediately started into how to solve the problem. You know, when they're kicking these things around, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And I was just amazed at that somebody could come up with something that quick, you know, as to how to resolve the problem. So anyway, the thinking outside the box, that's what it is I'm trying to hit on this. If you play Dungeons and Dragons consistently at table with other people, you're going to get better at thinking outside the box for yourself and by watching what they do.
I also have it on my resume, though, as a teacher, one of the things that we really emphasize is building positive relationships with students. That's like, you know, don't get me wrong, I want them to, you know, understand the major themes of Macbeth, but I also want to know them to know that I care about them like as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? It's really hard to imagine the student overall, the students in general who I've had the best relationships with, the ones who end up, you know, being the closest are probably the ones I play D&D with, because, you know, who would have guessed when you go and hang out with them in a more informal setting in a way that, you know, we're all on the same page. It's just the kind of thing where those are kids who you care about. You really do, you know? It's that same type of thing. And it helps build those relationships and with amongst their friends too.
Yeah.
So I have it on my resume in that capacity. So it's a great way to work on that.
It removes barriers, absolutely. Just like I was saying about the age barriers and the generational barriers, it just removes them. And Pixl is pointing out on chat, I guess he was afraid to say it in person, that it also could be very handy as you examine relationships with your employers into having more equitable relationship between employers and employees.
Yeah.
And that is really true. It can help you with problem solving. It can help you work through difficulties with coworkers and bosses and just lots of things there.
I mean, really what I was saying is like organize a D&D game with your coworkers and there's your organizing committee.
Yes.
True. I mean,
that's what I really say.
One of my coworkers is in my D&D table.
There you go. So when you start the revolution, there's two of you now together. That's what Pixl would say.
There's two of you and you have experience in tactics.
Yeah, there you go. Okay,
And it
so
comes in handy more than you would think.
Okay, I got two more questions I want to ask here. And the first one is, has anything, this is really for players or DMs, anything at your table really surprised you? Have you had surprises? Things you were not expecting? And if you can generalize, what kinds of things have happened that have surprised you?
Yes, I have one that I can speak about as probably in my first year of dungeon mastering. I had a co-DM that helped me out for the first 6 months, and then I started doing things on my own. One of the first issues that we ran into in the very beginning was we had a situation where there was an owl bear that was uh, supposed to it was supposed to be like the threat of like the whole, like it was supposed to be like the encounter. One of my players was a druid, and it was just like one of those like, why didn't I think of that moment? It got to a point where like they were rolling perception checks. The druid rolled really high, and then noticed the owlbear, and she was like, "I cast speak with animals." That small simple thing in my first year of dungeon mastering hit me so hard. It was like I was going 65 on the highway, and suddenly there was a cute family of kittens in the road, and I swerved and I fell off the highway. It was an absolute wreck. My brain stopped because I was like, okay, now you're speaking to the owlbear. And she befriended it. And this is a mistake I made on myself, where it was like she interacted with the owlbear, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to befriend it." And I was in the situation where I was like, "Okay, now she's friends with it. Okay, now the owlbear's just going to attack everyone else, but not her." And it was just like one of those awkward moments I wasn't prepared for exactly. Uh, but I think my most surprising thing that happened was I was like experimenting still my first year, and I had a homebrewed deck of many things. One of the items was as a joke was like a handgun, but it was like a handgun that creates black holes. I didn't think anybody was ever going to use it ever. I was like, this is so ridiculous. Why would anybody do it? And one of my most chaotic players, they were in a standoff in an alternate timeline, in a standoff with a really nasty NPC that they had bad experiences with before. And she's like, I pull out the gun and shoot him. And like, I was like, you weren't supposed to use that ever. It was a joke item. Why are you doing this to me? And it was probably one of the most memorable experiences I ever had at my table. We joke about it all the time now.
Created a black hole.
And absolutely destroyed the castle. Everyone died, and we all left home laughing. And I told everyone it was a dream the next session.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was great. So,
oh man, I'm gonna go with one moment that shaped me, changed me, morphed me into a better dungeon master, despite my feelings towards it at the time. So my party at the time, I'd been DMing for less than 2 months. They are going into this tower to find the Wizard of Necromancy, and what they find is, Cam, I'm sorry if my accent is off. As you can tell, I'm not actually British, but
not actually.
They find this girl that talks like this. She's very cute, very young, and everyone, is under the impression that she's just there to help them. Again, I apologize. Like I said, I'm not British.
I thought you were this whole
my
time.
British accent.
That's,
I mean,
I'm
that
shocked.
was brilliant. Better than mine.
But so they think she's the assistant until she opens up a trap door and tries to drown them, and they come to the conclusion that she's the Wizard of Necromancy. So I'm like, all right, they're gonna survive this. They're gonna go in this big fight, and they go, join us. And I'm like, ha ha ha, no, I shall try to kill you again. And they survive and say, no, seriously, you should join us.
Oh my
and I'm like, okay, no. Okay. You know what? Fine. Roll a persuasion check. The only way this is going to work is with a nat 20, and you have to say one specific phrase. And they said the phrase and rolled a nat 20. So my party of 4 level 4 characters just gained a level 13 Wizard of Necromancy NPC to join them. I had to rewrite the rest of the campaign. I had to rewrite everything because you cannot plan for that. But can I tell you, it was the best thing that ever happened, because she didn't need to join them for every fight. She would be like, this, honestly, why would you expect me to dirty my hands in this? I'm not going to do that. You go do it yourself. I'm going to watch and laugh at you. And that's what she would do. And then other times she'd be like, oh, this actually does benefit me, so I'm going to help you. Like, I learned so many things from this one thing that at the time I had no answer for whatsoever.
Hey.
David, we should have tried that with Bejweezix.
Oh, Bejweezix. God, he's one of my favorite NPCs I've ever done. I don't know that he's a real great response to this question. I surprised you guys way more than I got surprised. But as a DM, the thing that surprised me, and this may be what Bonus Mom was trying to get me to relate the story of, I don't know. Or maybe somebody else asked, I don't know. But we had in our campaign this situation where one of the characters in the campaign had a twin sister who had been abducted by a dragon when they were children. And the one character had she was a ranger, and she'd basically spent her whole life trying to, I guess, find out what happened. And so I had the sister basically belong to an order of people whose job it is to kind of sequester powerful and or evil magical artifacts so that they couldn't, go around wreaking havoc. And that, by the nature of them being such a secretive organization, was never allowed to make contact with her sister, but kind of like kept tabs on her. And through a series of events, they ended up needing to go meet these people because the player characters were finding these really powerful orbs. and they wanted to have something to do with them other than just carry them around. They wanted to lock them away someplace safe. And so they ended up meeting the sister, and my cousin, who played the character whose sister had been, abducted, whatever, decided that her character would be furious that her sister was alive and knew she existed and never contacted her, and try to kill her in the scene. So it was so crazy what ended up happening that I basically just had to stop the session and be like, I don't know what to do right now. I am so completely taken off guard by this. The long story being, it was a wild moment that happened, and we got through it, and it was fine. I would actually recommend don't do those things to your DM. Collaborate with them more than try to trick them.
That's the thing we
every once in
learned.
a while, something unexpected happening, or you see an opportunity that comes up in front of you and you don't have time to confer about it, and you just jump on something that all is fine, whatever. But she had plotted this basically to totally throw me for a loop, and it did, and the whole session got derailed. And it was one of the most iconic things that happened in the whole campaign, so I'm not mad about it or anything, but definitely you could do I could have done probably a better narrative job with that moment if she had come and collaborated with me and said okay, this is how I think my character reacts to this. Then I could have been prepared with how the world would react to that, if that makes sense. But that really caught me off guard, and we had to fully stop the session and just be like, I gotta figure this out.
And
we gotta
the
talk.
DM was not the only one that was surprised, because she hadn't told anybody.
She hadn't told anybody. Everybody was completely surprised. So
it's very scary when your players plot against you, especially when they decide to make a secret group chat to plot against the DM. Isn't that right? Yes, isn't that anyway? Sorry. No, that's it.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Well, and there are certain, not to just keep going myself, but there are certain styles of play that are more adversarial than others in terms of the DM player relationship. I don't tend to be a super adversarial DM, my Curse of Strahd game notwithstanding. But I tend to prefer to collaborate with my players more than be adversarial. I do run the bad guys, but I'm not the type of DM, and most DMs that I know aren't the type of DM where if I know what your plan is, I'm going to engineer specifically ways to foil it. The bad guys are basically DM metagaming. I'm not going to say, because I Pixl know what their plan is, I'm going to make the bad guys who have no way of knowing what their plan is know what their plan is and foil it, right? If there are in-game reasons why that might happen, that makes sense. But there are other styles of play where people are a little more adversarial, particularly in the old school dungeon crawl style, where it's really a survival game of you versus the cruelty of the DM's puzzles. But that scenario, it's more of an impersonal, you're up against the nefarious traps and monsters of this dungeon, not I, the DM, am going to specifically figure out ways to thwart your attempts. It's the reverse of that. I've engineered all this crazy crap and you have to, thwart me, versus, you've accidentally told me your plan to deal with the bad guy, so now I'm going to have the bad guy outmaneuver you because he knows what your plan is, even though he shouldn't, right?
I would really be.
There's a really fun, if you ever play the Rick and Morty adventure, that one kind of turns that on its head, where it goes into very meta role play, because the DM has to role play Rick, who is the DM of a game, and all the players play Rick and Morty characters who are playing characters. And
my
as you
gosh.
might imagine, Rick making a dungeon is exactly what you would expect Rick making a dungeon for. There's a reason, though, why that is a one-shot and not an extended campaign. Because as fun as it is for a session, that would be egregious and very unfun for extended periods of time. Though it is fantastic for a single night or two. I can highly recommend it, especially if you add imbibements to said playing. So it can be really fun to do that.
Well, we have certainly hit upon the fact that Dungeons and Dragons is very creative, both for the person who writes the adventure, for the players who play, and then when all those things get together. I would be very offended if my dungeon master took what I shared with them that I wanted to do and used it against me. That would be tough for me. That really would. And now, if the dungeon master told us at the beginning of the game that was the nature of the game, that would be a different thing, which brings up the point I'm going to assume you all agree with me on, but jump in if you don't. Oh, we're about to get rated from Ham Pamwich. So, wow, is that this is a collaborative effort that you're working here. It's a collaborative story, and everybody is working together. Pixl told me back when he and his buddies played the little bit that they played in high school that they didn't really know how it all worked, and they would just take whatever was going on in the game and try to rip it to shreds and see what they could mess around with. And that must have been impossible for whoever was trying to be the DM. But one of the things that, oh, and welcome, thank you everybody for coming in. We're glad to see you. There's a thing that somebody said along there, and I want to be sure we hit this before we call it a night, okay, on what we're talking about. We joke about it all the time. And that's the thing about D&D. We talk about it all the time. If you ever do run into those people that you played at table with, right? You meet at the party or in the hallway at school or I don't know, wherever it is. Those moments, those fun times, some of them are surprises, some of them are sad, most of them are really funny. But yeah, you talk about those, I guess, like the football players talk about the big football plays, right? That you just relive those moments forever. So, it gives you a history, doesn't it? It really does. It gives you a history with people, things you can, share and talk about and remember together. And I think that's totally cool. I love that about the game because our game was family. So when we get together, and my brother and his wife had nothing to do with it, and one of my nieces, when our other niece gets together with us, it's like, yeah, we eat the meal and we do the nice thing, and then we scurry over here and we start talking Dungeons and Dragons just as frantically as we can in the amount of time we have. So do you have families that play with you? Or are you solo players alone in the world of D&D and you have to look outwards to your neighborhoods to find other players?
I am currently in the works and have been since I started with making sure that my children are involved with D&D as much as possible.
Oh, great.
My son, since he's been 3, has been trying to be a dungeon master so bad. He's been working on familiarizing himself with the books. He likes to come home from school, and he's been reading the player's handbook on his first day of school. He will read a couple paragraphs a day because it's a lot. But he's effectively gotten through like probably the first entire chapter of the player's handbook, so that he can make sure that whenever he does find a group of friends to play D&D, he is 100% prepared.
That is precious.
That just made my entire year.
Yeah,
that just made 2022 for me.
Tear coming down my cheek.
Very proud of him. I have like some old videos of him like going through the monster manual when he was like 3, just like describing the monsters. He can't read anything, but he was like looking at flumps, and he's like, yeah, this jellyfish monster comes by and it wraps around you and it takes off your head. And at 3 years old, I was like, that is very horrifying. I cannot wait to see what kind of dungeon master you are when you are so much older. And he has told me some very interesting stories, just like the creativity that comes with children. I've actually like used him for creating monsters. Together we homebrewed a vampiric limb tornado. It was kind of like a Sharknado thing, but it was made of limbs and blood. And I've used it against other players, and they're like, that is horrifying. Where'd you come up with that? And I was like, my 3-year-old did.
That's amazing.
Well, having rated us, Ham Pam, which is telling us that she's returning my kiddos to me, and then Cam is asking, did you take good care of them? Did they get enough to eat? Are they hydrated? So that's totally cool. I love it. Anybody else?
I mean, in terms of family, I mentioned to you guys. I mean, you saw the box. That is actually the original box as well. So that's not like I've rebought it or anything. That's the same one I've had since 6-year-old. It's missing the dice. It's missing half the figurines. I mean, there's bugbears in there and goblins and all sorts. And it was my older brother who actually introduced me to D&D years and years and years ago. And I guess I loved it so much when I played it with my brother, but it was literally just me and my brother. My mum is very much not into that kind of thing. She likes Cluedo and she likes Monopoly, and that's about it. But he introduced me to it, and it's a game that I grew to love. but never got back to playing until I was an adult, and then realized, wait, this is even more fun as an adult because I have so many more options now than I had before. And 5e is obviously entirely different to that. That is like an entirely planned story, pre-gen characters. You've got counter tokens for your health. Like literally, it's all set out for you. You don't do anything other than just say what you're gonna do. And my plan is now is that I'm actually going to be returning the favor, and once I've kind of got things set up, is I will be teaching my niece and nephew, my brother's children, how to play D&D. And it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and hopefully now I can, and I've got the community around me to support me with like getting everything together and knowing what I'm doing, so why not, you know? So you guys are kind of monumental to that as well. So family and friends are important when it comes to D&D, but you can make those family and friends through playing D&D as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A couple of interesting chat remarks. Apparently, Black Moon has actually been at a table with a DM who tried to kill them every single time they played, which is a little different from the Monsters Want to Win too. You know, the dungeon master certainly has to play their monsters as though they're, you know, are the bad guys. The bad guys want to win, and they know why they want to win, and they're after something just like the players are. But anyway, so that was an observation, and our chat's finding our stories very emotionally fulfilling. So I'll just say that, which was just totally cool. Just that they're enjoying what we have to say. And Black Moon was also saying that she includes her spouse in the games that she creates. And one of the things I enjoy in Dungeons and Dragons, we have not touched on this as a part of the game, is that thing about improv and that thing about being able to play. Like a thing you can do at table as you go along is you can befriend another player, another character, and you don't even know the player. Okay.
Yep.
You don't know the player, but you start interacting in this backstory, and of course, eventually you'll know the player. But you make connections in the game that the characters would make that the human beings would never make. But it can draw you closer, and that's where those really super friendships come in. So why I'm looking at our time, and I think I'm ready. I want to hear anything anybody else has to say. But my final question is, so ultimately, why are you doing this? If somebody said, why are you playing that odd game, what would your answer be? And then anything else you want to say too, of course, any other final remarks. But why are you doing this?
That's easy. It's, to me, it's I said earlier, for the first 27 years of my life, I never had a way to really express, to tell these stories that that I could come up with, like never really live out my full potential. And I feel like I can now. I've discovered I'm really good at making backstories. I have a whole TikTok series going on right now where I create a backstory with no prep time other than what people give me. And I love that. I love coming up with stories, coming up with my worlds, and one thing that I really love is I love getting to play the villain. I love putting time into making my villains and making them unique, making them fun. And I love getting to do that. But I also love getting to play the hero, the one that comes in and everything's looking grim. Everyone is under half health. The wizard's out of spell slots. The cleric can't heal anything. The barbarian's axe is broken. And my paladin runs in with a broken lance and takes out the dragon. Like, that's amazing. Like, I wish that actually happened, but it didn't. I love coming up with the challenge of, hey, I want to do a steampunk world. Hey, I want to do a space world. Can you combine the two? Sure, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll find out a way to do it. I love and then getting to do this with people that, that I get to call friends and that genuinely care about the stories that not only I set up for them, but then they get invested, they make it their own, and I get to walk alongside them. And this thing that always makes me tear up as a dungeon master is when my players get in those sessions where they're just role playing and my NPC is just in the back for 30 minutes, not saying a single word, and they're just talking to themselves. I get a little bit of a tear almost every time because I'm like, that's how you know that they're having fun, that they're enjoying the world. And all these reasons and more are the reasons why it's not that I want to play D&D. It's I am privileged to play this game with this amazing community. And I mean, even with my home group, it's just a privilege that I am consider myself very blessed to be able to do.
Okay. Fabulous answer. Did he leave anything for anybody else? Why are you all playing this game?
If no one else wants to go, I
Sure.
can go. I play this game because I have struggled with ADHD. I struggle with maintaining interests and hobbies, and with Dungeons and Dragons, it has been the one consistent hobby I have. And for me, storytelling is very important. I love telling stories, but another thing I love doing is I genuinely enjoy making people feel better, whether that be through laughter, whether that be through an emotional story or character death. I like to help people escape the stress and the pain that comes with reality, unfortunately. And for me to have a group of people at a table with me and we're doing silly voices and blowing things up with guns, or using mage hand to pants an enemy and that becomes the trope throughout the entire campaign, those things there are just a way to escape that, even for a few hours a day. And just knowing I was able to maybe help somebody get through something tough is such an amazing thing. When I first moved to where I am, one thing that me and my wife wanted to do was play D&D, but a lot of people didn't do it. What we did was we started a weekly how to D&D class at our local game store.
Oh, okay.
And we did that for a long time, and I was able to meet people in real life that were interested or did play, just didn't have people. We did that forever until COVID hit. But now I'm in a position where, like, I honestly, D&D is, I don't know, I just feel like it was a thing I was probably born to do, telling stories. I write books from the adventures I've been doing. I create different adventures and I help people flesh out their characters. I like helping people in the community and telling stories. It's just, it allows me to do all of these things, and I feel so much better on the other end of it all, just knowing that maybe a little bit of what I did helped somebody.
Okay.
Stop making me
Awesome.
tear up over here.
Yeah. Wow.
Sorry, if you think that was teary, you should, like they said, you should read the will that I may or may not have wrote at 2:00 in the morning after my character died.
Do not do it. Do not read it.
It was,
You don't want to. I cried.
it was emotional, even
cried.
for me, because like when that character died, like a part of me died with him, and it was like writing and just saying farewell to that character. And I see his sheet there, and I don't touch it really. Like I look at it, I'm just like, what a good character, what a good journey I had with him.
It was a real goodwill. Not gonna lie, it was a real goodwill. Like
my real
my character barely interacted. But my character barely interacted and still got a mention in the will, and I was just like,
Oh.
it was great. There's a whole like he writes down like if a creature devoured me, this is how you should handle that situation.
Oh my gosh.
It was like broken down
through
into categories of what you would do in each scenario.
Okay, I think that's another chat right there. The will. We'll do the will.
You should get Beast in on that chat because of the stuff he did with
Bill. Oh my God. Yeah, our ending to Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Okay.
D&D is a fun game, and it turns out that crying is fun, guys. Okay.
It is.
Why is that so
Crying is
true?
fun, you guys.
Okay, is there anybody in this screen right now that has not cried? at D&D at some point? Anybody hasn't cried?
I've cried this month.
Yeah, I
I
cried
was crying just
tonight.
now.
Okay, anything else anybody wants to add about why you do this? Why do you play this game?
Yeah,
Cam.
I was going to.
Okay.
It's D&D's a fun game, friends. It is. I like to say D&D may not necessarily be for everyone, but it is for anyone. I think, right? So like some people, it may not be your bag, and that's okay. I say give it a try with an open mind. But the things that I like about D&D, it is a wonderful creative outlet. I don't do as much of the homebrew, home world building stuff as I used to, but that was a really important creative outlet for me at a kind of particular time in my life, and really helped me develop those skills. One of the other things that was nice for me about it, I also have ADD, and have trouble like I come up with ideas and great like big I'm like a big idea person, but
Same.
like the execution I always struggle with, right? Actually finishing what I start, terrible. But D&D is nice because it's short contained chunks of stuff you have to come up with, and if you don't get it all done, your friends don't get to have a good time, and you want your friends to have a good time, so it kind of gives you a bit of a deadline to motivate you. And that was really helpful. Two, I also really love the like role playing and the little bit of like acting and the voices and the getting into the head of the character and reacting to my players and stuff like that. That's a lot of fun. And then the final thing that I want to do is that I think in a certain sense D&D captures two of the most like fundamentally human experiences, which is our engaging in a community and telling stories. I think telling stories is about the most human thing that we do. When we look at like, sort of anthropologically what it means to be a human being, there are certain people who argue, and I don't know enough about this topic to say if these people are the right ones or the wrong ones, but there are certain people who argue that really the thing that sets modern humans apart from many of their sort of evolutionary ancestors is our ability to tell stories and to imagine events, worlds, things that aren't currently happening. And so you're really engaging with something like that is a primal and important part of what it means to be a human. And you're doing it in a collaborative community group, which is one of the other things. I think when we think about, again, what it means to be a human, not only is it the narrative and the ability to tell stories and to appreciate stories and how that impacts us and our sort of both our psychology and our sort of, I don't know, biology of what our brains are. But to me, the other thing that makes us the kind of dominant species on the planet that we basically are is not actually our ability to use tools or our ability to bend the environment to our will. Really, it's our ability to cooperate. I think when we look at what it is to be a human, that like the cooperation is the thing that we do basically better than any other species. Even when you consider like, oh, ants and bees and certain like species of bugs do all these amazing things, but like you drive a car, right? You don't know anyone who built any part of that car, and it internalizes fire and explodes it from dinosaurs that were pumped out of the ground and processed. You don't know anyone who was any part of that process, right? Like, and you trust that car's going to work and it gets you where you need to get. Like, and everything we touch all day, every day is actually a part of this enormous web of human cooperation, right? That is really the thing that makes us able to do all of these things that we're able to do as a species. And so you're really basically, all of that is to say that you are engaging with two incredibly fundamental and primal parts of what it is to be a human being, and that is to share stories with people that you're close with and to cooperate and exist in community. And I think that those are incredibly valuable, and it helps teach you those skills and build those skills, and you have fun while you're doing it.
All right. Excellent. Cam, what you gonna say?
I love you, Pixl, but following your philosophy, I mean, dude, that was incredible. Like,
I was
I'm
gonna
sat here
say.
like,
My goodness.
yeah, but no, seriously, like every single point everyone has made is like so totally accurate. I mean, I could barely reiterate most of it as well. Like, I mean, for me personally, my biggest thing with D&D is escaping reality. I mean, the truth of the matter is, we live a fairly mundane life, day to day. I mean, here in the UK, it really isn't filled with dragons and wizards and magic and really cool things. There is a lot of
Oh
castles.
man.
Well, not
Merlin's-
anymore.
Merlin's
Oh,
not
okay.
still there.
Unless I'm Merlin.
Oh,
Never know.
ooh.
Dun, dun, dun. But no, seriously, we live a fairly mundane life, and who does want to live in a world with magic and monsters and cool things and stories galore and that pure childhood essence? And that's what it is for me. I love escaping reality into that world of childhood and imagining something entirely different. And like I'll play a campaign and you don't have to put pictures in front of me for me to imagine what a character looks like or who a character is or what's happening in the story or what that place looks like, because that's what D&D is to me, is just imagination. It's the wholesome childhood imagination, and escaping reality is actually quite fun.
All right.
Days of
Agree.
Day,
That. I love
Very
that.
good.
yeah.
Doc, did you have anything you wanted to jump in with, or had they?
Sure, yeah. Well, this kind of plays off of what Pixl said, but at the end of the day, I'm an Epicurean. I believe that you live life to be happy, and D&D is fun, and it makes me happy. And there are all kinds of big questions that we can ask, and I like to think about them. But at the end of the day, I want to do something that I think is fun. I want to enjoy life, and D&D is fun and lets me enjoy life. And maybe that's a very simplistic answer, but honestly, that's literally all I care about. If we are Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill over and over again, I at least want to enjoy it every once in a while. So
There you
D&D
go.
lets me enjoy rolling the boulder up the hill every once in a while.
If you made carvings on the boulder in just the right way, it might sort of like act as like a little bit of a comic strip story as it rolls down.
I'm here for it.
Potato prints.
Somebody make this happen.
BonusDad, you've been awfully quiet, but did you want to throw any last minute things in there, or you're just here? You're whatever. You unmuted. That means something.
Don't ever ask a preacher to say something.
Oh gosh. You did understand the question, didn't you?
I just enjoyed playing it with my family.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as into it as Pixl and Bonus Mom, but I enjoy sitting down, particularly when we were sitting at the table. I enjoyed it online on Zoom, and it was it's just been a journey together. And at my age, playing with 30 somethings and everything in between is it's a pretty amazing thing. It's as Bonus Mom said, it's an intergenerational kind of thing, and it's makes it possible for Joe's little boy to play as well as this 77-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an amazing thing. I mean, it got us together once a week for several years, and just to sit down together and play a game we all enjoyed. And it was fun getting to know the characters and getting to know your own character, and getting to know the other characters at the table, and see how those characters came out of the people who were playing them. And it's you can go to, I don't know if you're into theater or not, live theater, but you watch a movie, it's the same all the time. It's the same every time. You might notice things in it. Some of them they put Easter eggs in, and you catch that and say, oh, I didn't see that before. That's neat. With a play, even though the dialogue is the same, the blocking is the same, every performance is slightly different. And if you see that same play by done with different actors and different staging, different props, different scenery, that kind of thing. I mean, it's similar, but it's different enough that it makes it interesting. That Trish was in a play called Mousetrap. No, let's see. No, that wasn't. It was Blythe's Spirit, wasn't it? Yeah, Blythe's Spirit. And for our 35th anniversary, we went to the Clarence Brown Theater, which is on the University of Tennessee campus, and they were doing and these were equity actors. Trish and I were strictly amateurs, but these were equity actors, and they did Blithe Spirit, and they had a question and answer at the end of the thing, at the end of the play, and Trish got to interact with the lady that played her character in this production at Clarence Brown Theater, which was really, really interesting, and I think she enjoyed it thoroughly. And in fact, I think the lady that played the Madame Arcadia in the Clarence Brown production enjoyed talking to Trish because
Well, sure.
the same character. But
Well, true. It needs to be added in this whole thing about our family and the intergenerational is also that my children lived in Utah, away from their cousins, in Tennessee the whole time they grew up. So this was the way they got to know each other. Okay. Thank you for everything that you have said. Thank you for sharing. Can we all come back and continue to talk? Because I just think this is totally awesome. I love it. For why do I play this game? It's because I like to pretend. If you want to get down to the basics at it, I just like to pretend. Yeah, that's my thing. And all the reasons that all of you said. So it looked like our chat got kind of quiet. I think we have just but they're telling stories to each other in the chat about things from their particular games. So that's totally awesome. So thank you all, more than I can say, for being here. Any last remarks from anybody? I think we've done it, but if anybody has a last remark, I'll let them have it. Otherwise, I'm gonna close it down and say thank you so much to all of you. Oh, Cam had one.
I have no remark.
Oh, God, no! Do you see how he spells his name?
Yes.
All right, bye everyone.
I have waited for that moment my entire life.
Oh, one Black Moon says the community is
Cam,
helpful.
roll for initiative between me and you right now. Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah, we all
Let's
just
go.
took we took 1d4 psychic damage and have disadvantage on our next melee
Okay.
weapon attack.
Goodbye.
I've got a D20 right here. I'll roll it.
as my
The next
college
time we
English
meet, you
professor would have
probably
said,
won't see
rhubarb.
rhubarb. You probably won't see Cam next time. I can see that we're going to have to do something about that. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to end the screen. Thank you. I'm sorry you missed it, Delport, but it will be, you can see it for the next week, for the next 7 days, and then it will be on YouTube and probably will be in the Smithsonian before it's over with. So thank you very much
Probably
to
the Library
everyone.
of Congress.
At least the Library of Congress. And thank you. We'll redeem hydrate many times. A couple of people are afraid you all needed to drink during the thing and you didn't.
I drank a lot. This is all gone.
Okay. Bye-bye to everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
And love you guys.
Bye.